ABC misrepresents video from Kentucky as battle footage in Syria, and secret recordings at CNN suggest biased news coverage is a mandate. This Just Saying looks at shoddy journalism and sanctioned bias to explain why news media credibility appears dead. Hi there, Just Sayers. I've missed you. And I want to thank you for joining me once again. And I know it's been a while since you've heard from me, but since the last time I did a podcast, both of my daughters and my husband underwent surgical operations, 2 of them kind of major. So being a patient advocate and caregiver is how I've been spending most of my time. But not to worry, everyone is on the mend. And while I was at the hospital waiting for my husband to get into the recovery so I could go join him, my mind started thinking about getting back to work, and this is what came to mind as far as I needed to talk about this right away, and that is the bias and poor journalism standards that were disclosed concerning CNN and ABC on the same day last Monday. And it definitely prompted me to get back to work. I began Just Saying back in 2018 with episodes discussing the news media, obviously, because that's my background. I wanted to start somewhere about something I knew a lot about. Since then, examples of media bias and poor journalistic practices have been too innumerable to track. But these 2 stories that broke on Monday, October 14th, that showcase the self-inflicted wounds killing news media credibility, I had to answer them. I had to get back and talk about this. The first example is ABC's erroneous use of footage while reporting on the dire and volatile situation in Syria. ABC then fed suspicions of deception by failing to inform its viewers of the horrible misrepresentation in a proper fashion. They just tried to gloss over it. Next, there are the secret recordings of CNN conference calls that bolster claims that the company's leaders have created an unprofessional environment in the workplace and that there are plenty of people who are not very happy about it. I'll get back to that. But first, I want to let you know that these are examples of what I discussed in the first official podcast of Just Saying. In a 2-part series, I examined what's happening with American media beneath the surface of its news operations. I covered how the news you see is influenced by vertical integration, oligarchy ownership, groom bias, activism presented as journalism, and social media. If you would like to listen to those episodes or read the articles, simply go to justsaying.com. That's GISTSAYN.com. And there you can click on the articles and episode extra tabs. I will also place links in the show notes so that you can click on them there if you'd like as well. These episodes are entitled Media Woes Navigated by a Scalded Frog, Parts 1 and 2. And yes, I am the scalded frog. One thing, if you go back and listen, and your app has the ability to vary the speed, listen to it a little sped up. I went back and was listening to the shows to refresh my memory a little bit about what I talked about, and I realized I was being way too careful and deliberate in my delivery. I'll continue to work on that. Try and find that happy medium between talking too fast that people can't understand and talking too deliberate. All right, so even before I began the podcast, Americans were already feeling pretty beleaguered by media bias. It's something that was already being measured. They still thought the media had an important role to play in our democracy, but they believed it was doing a poor job. According to a Gallup Knight Foundation survey that was released back in January of 2018, on a trust scale of 0 to 100, the American public gave the media a 37. A 37. If your kid came home with a 37 on a test, really? I mean, I don't know who would find that acceptable. This failing grade is due in part to media actions that disregard objectivity and obliterate the line between fact and opinion. The damage to the public trust is crippling. It's a crippling consequence. And it's not easily overcome, especially when continued instances pick at the wounds. All right, so first up, we're going to talk about ABC's slaughter in Syria, or was that Kentucky? I'll explain. On the October 13th Sunday edition of World News Tonight, anchor Tom Lamas described a Turkish attack in northern Syria against Kurdish civilians. Beneath a banner that read, "Slaughter in Syria," that's a quote, "Slaughter in Syria," ran nighttime footage of explosions and tracer rounds from large caliber, fully automatic weapons. As this dramatic video rolled, Lamas said, quote, "This video right here appearing to show Turkey's military bombing Kurd civilians in a Syrian border town," unquote. It was a pretty spectacular video. Later in the broadcast, ABC used the footage again as its foreign correspondent, Ian Pennell, reported from Syria. He said, quote, "This video obtained by ABC News appears to show the fury of the Turkish attack on the border town." ABC producers liked this video so much that it was used not just during the Sunday version of World News Tonight, but again the next morning on Good Morning America. Reusing overnight footage is a pretty common practice because the morning show's viewership is made up of different people. If you combine recent ratings of both these shows, it's likely that at least 10 million people saw this video depicted as, quote, "Slaughter in Syria." The language used by Pennell indicates that ABC did not shoot the footage, but instead acquired it from somewhere else. This is not uncommon either. Networks often pay trusted freelancers for video. If the story is big enough, they will occasionally pay random individuals who capture breaking news, even if it's just on their cell phones. Okay, so what's the problem? The problem is, in this case, the footage they showed was not of an attack on Kurds by Turkish military in Syria. The video was not recorded in Syria, and it is not a recording of any kind of slaughter whatsoever. The video used on two of ABC's major broadcasts matches explosion for explosion with that of a military weapons demonstration recorded at the Knob Creek gun range in West Point, Kentucky, and published to YouTube in 2017 under the title Knob Creek Night Shoot 2017. The demonstration is a biannual event called the Military Gun Shoot and Military Gun Show, and it is open to ticket-paying members of the public. In the YouTube version of this video, you can actually see people at the bottom of the screen holding up their cell phones to record the event. Somewhere along the line, those people were cropped out of the version used on ABC. The video's color quality was also altered. These actions imply deception by someone. Okay, you don't know who, but someone was being dishonest here. The public learned of the improper use of this footage on Twitter. A guy who goes by the handle The Polish Patriot and describes himself as a video researcher and Trump supporter is the one who appears to have been first to point out the similarity between the video that aired on ABC News and the video titled Knob Creek Night Shoot 2017 that is published on YouTube. Shortly before the video re-aired on GMA Monday morning, he tweeted, "Wow, ABC News is trying to pass gun range videos as combat footage from Syria." Other websites with self-proclaimed conservative views were quick to follow, not just pointing out the misuse, but speculating as to the company's motives. Quote, mainstream media wonders why conservatives call them fake news. It doesn't take the president pointing it out anymore for us to see their dishonest ways, reads an article on NOQreport.com. ABC News is the latest propaganda machine attacking the president, this time trying to manipulate the public by using 2016 gun range footage as an example of Turkey's military bombing civilians in eastern Syria, unquote. And right there you can see they were mistaken. It wasn't 2016, it's 2017. Mistakes happen all the time when you are covering the news, especially when you're trying to do it fast. The important part is that you correct it. So by noon, about 18 hours after first airing the footage, ABC News did issue a cookie-cutter correction for both programs via tweet. The statement says, quote, we've taken down video that aired on World News Tonight Sunday and Good Morning America this morning that appeared to be from the Syrian border immediately after questions were raised about its authenticity. ABC News regrets the error, unquote. By Monday evening, the Knob Creek Gun Range responded to the use of the footage on Facebook. Quote, we'd like to thank ABC News for the free advertising on our biannual machine gun shoot and military show, reads the Post. Keep up the good work, ABC News. Later that day, the gun range also posted a picture stating that it was, quote, marked safe from the Turkish invasion in Kentucky today, unquote. So they acknowledged that, yes, that was their footage, and they were kind of playing off a little lighthearted. And they weren't the only ones. From the New York Times to Fox News, other traditional media outlets acknowledged ABC's mistake and its tweeted apology. And then they moved on. I have not seen a single conventional media outlet really take ABC to task concerning how this could have happened. TV Newser categorized the incident as World News making a rather significant boo-boo that unfortunately carried over to Good Morning America the next day. We hear that the network is investigating what exactly happened. To its credit, ABC News acknowledged the error. That's what TV Newser wrote later that day. Okay, so it acknowledged that it made a mistake. But is that enough? Did it though? Did it do enough? Yes, it issued a correction and admitted regret, but did it truly take responsibility? In my opinion, no, it did not. Thus far, ABC News has declined comment on how the mix-up had happened. Given the rocky relationship the news media has with people these days, the how is more important than the fact that it happened. Mistakes are made, but taking responsibility and reassuring the audience that steps will be made to prevent it from happening again are crucial to maintaining trust. It is essential to understand that this was not a 3-second image accidentally dropped into a pre-produced package filled with file footage. People responsible for the editorial content of these shows saw this video before it aired. I can say this with confidence because I have firsthand knowledge of how this process works. They highlighted this video. It was written to and specifically referenced by on-air personalities. For this to happen, somewhere, someone had to pass this video off as being battle footage from Syria. Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened. I don't know who it was, but somebody said, look at this great footage of Syria. Take a look at it. And they wrote to it. Were the producers and the reporters duped by a foreign freelancer looking for a payday? An editor under the gun who says, we got to find something that's better to put in here? Or someone wishing to advance a narrative? I don't know. The public doesn't know. and ABC doesn't seem inclined to enlighten it. The use of words like appearing to show and obtained by ABC News indicates to me that somewhere along the line, someone felt the need to hedge against this video's authenticity. Someone had questions. The use of clarifying words like appears and alleged is a common way to cover your ass when speaking of something you personally have not or cannot confirm. Throughout the article that's posted on justsaying.com, I have been using appears in quotes just to make that point. But these words cannot excuse what is happening now. Under the circumstances, given the fact that it was used on multiple programs, given the fact that it was highlighted and specifically written to and spoke to, issuing a correction on Twitter alone is not enough. The people watching World News and GMA on TV are not necessarily the ones following them on Twitter. It's bad enough when you issue a correction the next day, because you don't always get the same audience who watched you the night before watching you the next day. It's hard enough to cover that as far as letting them see both sides. But they did the very minimum amount that they thought was necessary, and then quickly moved on, hoping that no one would pay attention to it. Failing to acknowledge its mistake on air during both broadcasts appears dishonest, and it opens the network, and thus all traditional media, up to further cause for distrust. Critics on the right, like newsbuster.org, wasted no time pointing out that ABC did not address the mistake on either of its programs that followed. Quote, later that evening, despite anchor David Muir dedicating 5 minutes and 28 seconds to the fighting in Syria, the network refused to acknowledge their misleading story and correct the record for their millions of viewers, unquote. Twitter users also savaged the correction with blistering memes and comments. Comments like, quote, an apology is not in order here. An apology implies they made a mistake, tweeted retired Colonel Rob Maness. He went on to say, quote, at least 3 layers of decisions were made putting the story together. The video was obviously doctored to remove evidence of its origins, unquote. On Wednesday, 2 days after GMA aired the story, Twitter showed that more than 18,000 people were still talking about the correction on the World News Twitter feed. That number is dwarfed by the millions who initially viewed it during the broadcast. President Trump also called out ABC's use of the video during a press conference at the White House. I have video from C-SPAN embedded in the site if you want to go take a look at it. In fact, all the videos that I'm referencing are embedded in the article on the Just Saying site, so you can go to one place and just click through them instead of hunting and pecking all around the internet like I did. If ABC cares to try and repair the damage done to its credibility, it needs to address how this happened, and they need to address it publicly. Otherwise, the number of people who distrust the media will continue to climb. That is not a number that needs to climb. Remember, the media is already failing when it comes to trust. One would think if they have nothing to hide that they would quickly come out and say, whoa, here's how this happened. Let's lay this out for you, and here's what we're doing to make sure it never happens again. That's not what they've done, though. All right. The next example appears, insert your air quotes there, to show that Jeff Zucker uses CNN to advance an anti-Trump agenda. A lot of people think that, so that's not necessarily breaking news. But this is interesting. On October 13th, the website run by self-described guerrilla journalist James O'Keefe published the first installment of what he has advertised as an expose of CNN. The The Project Veritas video uses undercover recordings it claims a whistleblower named Carrie Porch made. In the story, Porch says he was a satellite uplink technician at CNN's Washington bureau. He also claims to have made undercover recordings that capture CNN employees acknowledging the network has an anti-Trump bias. According to Project Veritas, Porch also secretly recorded conference calls led by CNN's president, Jeff Zucker. Okay, for those of you who are unaware, morning rundown calls are a standard practice at networks. Executive producers and reporters listen to possible story ideas from across the country and the world, and then they receive their marching orders for the day. They are told which of these stories they are going to cover and which of these stories are likely to make it into the shows. On one of the recordings posted by Project Veritas, a voice identified as Zucker instructs his staff to ignore events being covered by rival organizations to focus solely on impeachment. Quote, "I don't care about the MSNBC event, okay? I don't care about them. Let's just stay focused on impeachment," a voice recording identified as Zucker says. He was on to say, quote, "We shouldn't just pretend, oh, this is going one way. And so all of these moves are towards impeachment," unquote. Now, to me, that recording isn't shocking. It may be sad, but it's not surprising. CNN's coverage has remained focused on Trump for years. The feud between Zucker, who greenlit The Apprentice back when he worked for NBC, and Trump is well known. They hate each other. If you didn't watch CNN or know that background, the fact that an executive wants to focus on one particular story on any given day is relatively routine. To push that one subject over others for years, though, does beg the question why. Okay, now you combine this with the recordings seem to reinforce that orders to pursue everything anti-Trump are coming from the very top down. What further frames the comments as blatant bias are the recordings that suggest that there are employees within the company who identify Zucker's actions as motivated by bias. These aren't outside people saying, oh, you guys are biased because you're not covering the story the way I like. These are people who work for CNN and who are complaining. There even seem to be those who question the agenda to cover Trump all day, every day. On one of these secret videos, a man identified as Nick Neville says, quote, "Jeff Zucker, basically the president of CNN, has a personal vendetta against Trump. It's not going to be positive for Trump. He hates him. He's going to be negative," unquote. Identified as a CNN media coordinator, Neville expressed to colleagues that some CNN employees want to err on the side of journalistic integrity, but that the big boss Zucker is telling them what to do. And you have to a certain extent, he says, follow his verdict. Throughout the week, Project Veritas released 3 different videos using these secret recordings called Expose CNN. On the third one of these, a man named Patrick Davis, he's a manager of field operations as identified on the tape, said, quote, "I hate seeing what we were and what we could be and what we've become. It's just awful. I mean, we could be so much better than what we are. And the buck stops with him," unquote, meaning Zucker. Okay, so I feel bad for these guys. Neville and Davis appear, again, they are quotes there, to just be venting to colleagues, trying to understand the situation, and now suddenly their careers are torpedoed. They may not get fired, but their prospects of upward mobility at CNN are sunk. Much like ABC, it appears CNN chose to ignore Project Veritas, as did other traditional media outlets. Millions of people haven't. Reported analytics show that the first segment that was released by Project Veritas has thus far been viewed by 14.3 million viewers. Like I said on the first official episode of Just Saying, where I addressed that newsrooms were facing an onslaught of interference from distant parent companies. People who work in them are being forced to push the company line rather than gather the news. Back in 2018, I said, quote, "As with any business where you are not in control, you either get on board with the mandates or you get pushed out. Then the new people hired are taught from the beginning what is expected of them. I know a lot of very good people who would like nothing more than to just do the work, report the outcome without picking a side, but they also want to keep their jobs. In television, keeping your job means having stories on the air. Getting stories on the air means covering ones that the higher-ups want to see. Self-preservation is a powerful motivator. But what is good for the part is not always good for the whole." Unquote. Again, that was me back in 2018. And I stand by the fact that there are still people who would like to cover the news straight. But there really isn't a place that does that anymore. In fact, it appears CNN chose to double down while not directly commenting on the Project Veritas video. The company released a new ad stating, quote, "The impeachment inquiry. There's only one place for it. CNN.com/impeachment." Unquote. CNN may not want to talk about it, but the video has gotten lots of attention online. As I said, 14.3 million views thus far on just part one. And James O'Keefe promises there is more to come on this story from his company. Meanwhile, on Friday, an attorney representing President Trump and his campaign sent a letter to CNN executives referencing the contents of the Project Veritas video and claiming intentions to file legal action against CNN for misrepresentations to the public. In the letter, it says, quote, "Never in the history of this country has a president been the subject of such a sustained barrage of unfair, unfounded, unethical, and unlawful attacks by so-called mainstream news as the current situation." Unquote. This is in the letter written apparently by Charles Harder. That's who sent it. He signed it. In a responding statement, CNN said, quote, "This is nothing more than a desperate PR stunt and doesn't merit a response." Unquote. That's all they had to say. Now, perhaps the president doesn't have grounds for a lawsuit. I'm not a lawyer. I doubt that he does. But the American people deserve news outlets they can trust. The old ignore criticism and it will go away tact is wearing thin, apparently even with CNN's own employees. Everyone is sick of it. They don't want to have to wade through and try and figure out, is this hype or the real thing? And therein lies the whole problem. Where do you go to find that? Everybody's just trying to appeal to what makes them angry and get clicks over it and drive it that way because it's all about revenue. And responsibility seems to have gone out the window. Okay, so here's the gist. These continued examples of the media's journalistic failings erode trust. When mistakes are made, they must be owned up to, not sidestepped. Otherwise, people assume the worst. In this case, that means they believe ABC intentionally tried to deceive the public by using footage from a Kentucky gun range and saying it's Syria because it looked worse than the footage they actually had. Outlets also need to take steps that help journalism regain its integrity by allowing employees to fill the role of reporters of events rather than activists of a company's seen or unseen agenda. In the case of the CNN recordings, Jeff Zucker's silence about this is deafening. He's not even trying to mount a defense. If traditional media does not change course, the number of people who think the media is failing to meet that critical role that it should be playing in democracy will continue to grow. And since it's already got a very bad failing grade, that is not going to end well for our republic. All right, that's the end of my rant for today. I hope there's some information that can help you out when you're trying to navigate things here. And again, I want to thank you for joining me. I will be back sooner. There won't be as big a gap. I've got several different things that are partway done. We'll try and get on them and get them finished for you. In the meantime, you have a great day. I'm Allison Cardivold. It's okay to agree or disagree because I'm just saying. If you like what you heard, make sure you go to the website, follow us there, follow us on all of the different social media platforms that you use because we are there. And whatever device you like to use to listen to podcasts, follow on that as well. And we'll keep bringing you some more information that you can trust.